Welcome to On Air, episode number 4, titled The City Takes Rome. Today we're going to reference an article, a very well-researched article by Phoenician Hunter titled The City Takes Rome, where it discusses Rome, the Vatican, Italy's unification in 1861, Britain, and the City of London. So this is going to be a very interesting discussion. And it all starts with the Italian unification in 1861 and Britain's involvement, which a lot of our audience may not be aware of. So welcome, Phoenician Hunter,
Thanks.
to our 4th podcast. Can you maybe let's start the discussion by talking about Italy's unification and the relevance that it had to Britain at the time.
Well, yeah, I just want to go back and establish the purpose for this particular article. Is that many people always state that, it's really the Vatican that runs everything. And then there are people who say, no, it's the Freemasons or it's the City of London. And so this was the reason I wanted to go back and find evidence which would suggest that either the Vatican is behind most of the current world events or it was another group. This is what the evidence shows in history. It's not one entity that rules forever. So the real purpose of this article was to find evidence to establish who's actually in charge of current world events. A lot of people say, oh, no, it's the Vatican or it's this group or this other group. So I wanted to find evidence which would suggest one group over the other. Something that people need to understand is if a group is in power for a while, it doesn't mean they stay there indefinitely. The other groups dethrone them. This is what history shows anyway. It shows there's a constant battle for power. So what I found was the British or City of London power really started to take hold in the early to mid 1800s. And this is where you see them, exerting their power around the world. And with the unification of Italy, it's quite evident that, there was one group taking out another. And the power of the old world was the church or the Vatican. And that's evident through the activities of the papacy. But, it's evident with the unification of Italy that was against the wishes of the Vatican. They were against unification. And as a result, they lost out. They lost a lot of power. They lost a lot of territory.
Can I maybe interject and
Yep.
say, why do you think that they were against it? Because they had so much control at the time and they were in fear of losing that control?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's evident with the actions of the Pope after the establishment of the country, the nation of Italy, the kingdom, sorry, that the Vatican stayed within the city walls of the Vatican for years, and they call it self-imprisoned in the Vatican City.
Who, the Pope?
Yeah. As a result of the unification of Italy, this is when they set up the microstate called Vatican City. Before that had what they called the Papal States. So, territories throughout the south of Italy. So they lost all that, and all they're left with is a little bit of territory in Rome. So they lost all those territories. They lost all the influence over those territories. And another thing I noticed was the celebrations, which is recorded, in various articles and newspapers from the time of the celebrations back in England over the unification of Italy. I mean, why would they care, so much? They love democracy and freedom so much over there that, they're so passionate about what's happening in other countries. That to me is always raises, my interest, because it's not how people behave,
So as a reference point, maybe jump back before the unification and talk about why there was a relationship or an affiliation with Britain. In particular, if you can maybe talk about the Holy Trinity, and you can explain what who the Holy Trinity are.
Well, there's three men in particular who begin the revolution. The three main people behind the revolution are attributed to Garibaldi, Mazzini, and Cavour. All three were Freemasons, and anyone who's looked into Freemasonry would know that if you're if you're affiliated with that entity, that's where your loyalties lie. They don't lie outside. So for instance, if you're a Catholic bishop, for instance, and you're a Freemason first.
That's right. But also, let's make mention that Garibaldi, Mazzini, and Cavour were referred to as the Holy Trinity, as I mentioned before.
Yeah, that's correct. So if you're affiliated with Freemasonry, then you're pushing or you're pushing the agenda or the of that fraternity. And Freemasonry at that time is really headquartered in London. That's the headquarters for World Masonry at the time. So what I found was that Garibaldi, Menzies, and Cavour spending a lot of time in London at that time, or England, prior, during the revolutionary period, right? And what I found was that Cavour was there to actually raise funds for the uprising, and he was successful. While Cavour was in London, he met with Baron Karl Bochum, who was the founder of Hambros Bank. He was of Jewish descent, and he was affiliated with the Rothschilds. That's where Cavour got his funding for the revolution. That was his task, was the finances. Obviously Garibaldi was the military side of things, and Manzini was the political, trying to find political support.
Hence the term the Holy Trinity, because they basically covered all aspects.
Yeah, yeah. And then in London, I also found that there was a special fund established, and this fund or organization was first to raise money and also to raise military aid. So the UK created a mercenary force, basically. Now, they called them the British Legion. Now, they've done this before. So this is something that I found that England does time and time again. So they'll raise a British Legion, and they're not always in English. There could be Scottish or Irish. In this case, the Irish did not volunteer for this because, as Catholics, they were against the unification of Italy. And actually, you'll see a lot of Irish people that actually went to fight with the Papal States,
yes,
against this British force and the forces of Garibaldi. So they raised this military legion called the British Legions, and they volunteered to join Garibaldi under his leadership. That's when they started the military campaign. And also found that the British Royal Navy was involved too, with helping Garibaldi's army land safely. So, the heavy military presence. I mean, for me, that's one country attacking another. But I mean, Britain is never mentioned in in the mainstream sources or literature.
by design, obviously.
Yeah, but Britain is not mentioned in the unification of Italy. It's like, there was an uprising between, Italian peasants against,
That's right.
the brutal establishment.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the same story. You find this throughout history, but you dig a little bit deeper and find there's always what I call the hidden hand. In this case, it's the British. It's been the British for quite a while, actually, but there's always some hidden hand influencing events behind the scenes.
So, with the birth of the British Legion, and obviously, they kept that fairly quiet, and during the unification, which, as you said, it was more an invasion or a takeover than anything.
Yeah, well, that's what it appears like.
Yeah. So, can you maybe talk about how Rome came about, which essentially brought an end to those papal states and the relevance to what you've just described?
Yeah, well, the capture of Rome was sort of the final piece in the unification, because at that point, Sicily collapsed, Naples, and Rome's left standing on its own, basically. So what they do is they actually attack Rome, and they attack the papacy, and it's successful. I mean, the papal states have their own military and their own mercenaries that are fighting to the end, but they don't go. They don't go and destroy the Pope and the papacy, and that would have looked bad. Basically, that would have been too many people would have been against that. Other nations would have at that point probably would have said, "Hey, what's going on here?" The French, the Spanish would have You can't, you're going one step too far. You can't do that.
because the
So
Catholic
they sort of,
Church had such a stronghold. And we should mention also that
yeah,
at the time, it was Pope Pius IX that was in charge of the Catholic Church.
yeah. So, I mean, at this point, the army's at the gates, there's a kind of surrender truce. And this is when they develop, or they create the microstate called the Vatican City, because that's all that's left. That's all they're allowed, basically, that little bit of space, that little bit of territory in Rome. So the rest of Rome becomes, the capital of this newly formed Kingdom of Italy, and the Pope has lost all voice at that point. He's cast aside. And he calls himself this. I forgot the actual term, but he's like imprisoned in the Vatican, and he stays there for almost 100 years.
Mm.
Successive popes do not leave Vatican City until that's overturned, I guess, when Mussolini comes into power years
Yeah,
later.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, in 1929. And then back home in Britain, when the news arrives, and Garibaldi's returns to Britain, London goes off as if there was, they've just won a military victory. And this is all recorded in the papers of the time, and you can see it. And this is something that struck me as quite strange. And so, why would the British people be
Be
celebrating
celebrating, yeah.
in that way? What I mean, today, if there's a revolution, I don't know, Bolivia, and some power takes over the current government, doesn't concern me one bit.
Mm. So maybe this could be a nice little segue into what you've referred to as the freedom of the City of London and the free men.
Okay.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about that in relevance to what you just mentioned in terms of Garibaldi arriving in Britain, or returning to London, and they were all celebrating
Well,
because
yeah.
they just obviously invaded
So
another country.
after the unification, Garibaldi's, he's a godlike hero. It's what they call Garibaldi mania hits London. He returns to a victory parade. He's also, while in London, I mean, all the people of any kind of stature in London want to meet Garibaldi. Shake his hand, and he's invited to the City of London. And this goes back to what we spoke about, I think, in other podcasts about the merchant guilds,
Yes.
who, to me, actually are the arm behind the City of London. So the merchant guilds run the City of London. They hide behind those entities. So he is awarded what they call the prestigious Freedom of the City of London Award, and it's usually only awarded to members of these guilds. So if you become a member of one of these guilds, you are given the freedom of what is called the Freedom of the City of London Award, which affords you certain privileges, which they never actually make clear what these privileges are. I
Mm.
guess you got to be in the know, you got to be in the group
Mm.
to be afforded that kind of information. What I found interesting too, when Garibaldi, and also there's not many non-British citizens who have been awarded this freedom of the city. Today, they've sort of, I mean, if people were to look today, they'll see a lot of names that are, sort of international people, but that is not the proper Freedom of the City award that was given before 1900. After that, they made it sort of more of a, I don't know, like a Nobel Peace Prize award. It's sort of a little bit more
Broader in its
broader, and
appeal. Yeah.
yeah, it didn't hold the same importance as it once did. So, but at this time, it was rarely given to outside British citizens. So he was one of the first to be given it. And what I found was that the Garibaldis were connected to Britain in interesting ways. Also, that his great grandsons actually went to fight for the British Army.
Right.
Went to fight for the British in the
In the Boer War.
Boer War as well.
Yes,
I
that's
mean,
right.
who does that? To me, the connection was too in your face to ignore. Then we also have in recent years, as you were mentioning, his great granddaughter was awarded. So this was in 2014, which
Mm.
is, brings her right up to the present.
Yes.
That his great granddaughter was bestowed the Freedom of the City of London Award also
Wow.
again. So, the city still acknowledges what her grandfather had done, and obviously still feel it's, the value of those actions.
So the relationship between
It's still
the
there.
United Kingdom, or the British Empire, let's say, and Italy, or the Italy of today, the unified Italy, is extremely strong even to this
Well, no,
day.
I would say between the City of London and the Garibaldi family, and these families that
Okay, we can say it's
associated with
so.
Freemasonry.
Okay, the City
So,
of London Corporation we're talking about, obviously.
yeah, yeah, which is, hand in hand with British Freemasonry. So basically, you've got the Holy Trinity, as you mentioned earlier,
Mm.
working for the Freemasons, who are also part of the City of London Corporation,
Can,
well, affiliated.
can I ask you the term free men, when the freedom of the City of London is given to, let's say, the Garibaldi, the free men, is that any connection to Freemasonry?
No, no,
Completely
free
separate?
man is sort of more of it goes back to more of a legal status, I
Okay,
guess. We'll probably talk about that in another podcast.
sure.
It pretty much gives the person bestowed with that status as not subject to certain authority, basically.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why you're free man. You're
Mm,
not subject to like a lord, a monarch, or a
okay.
king, basically.
Mm.
Okay, yeah, the mafia have what they call the made man. Is it the made
That's right.
man?
The maid, yeah,
Yeah.
he's been made.
Well,
You've seen that in a lot of movies.
exactly, that's what this is. Okay, that's
Right.
what the free man is. He's
Well, I think you
sort of
mentioned
become.
yeah, I think you mentioned in our last podcast the Pilgrim Society about, the world is run by mafia-like
Yeah,
organizations.
yeah,
And it is so true. It rings so true
yeah.
even today. Can I ask you another quite notable figure in history, Albert Pike, who everyone that knows this is a Freemason, or the father of modern day Freemasonry. What relationship did Albert Pike have to what you've just discussed with Garibaldi and the
Well,
unification?
we know that through letters that have been found, but they were in correspondence. So Mazzini and Albert Pike knew each other and wrote to each other. I don't believe I mentioned him in this particular article.
Oh, it's a brief takeaway.
Oh,
It's
right.
not
Okay.
actually
Did
a
I?
deep mention. But if you've got anything of importance to add in the connection to this, that'd be great. If not, we could
Well, yeah.
obviously refer to it.
No, there is correspondence between the two, and they mentioned something like, one of their shared goals was to take down the church.
Mm,
And, I mean, a lot of people who look into Freemasonry have seen this elsewhere, that was one of their main goals, was to take down the church. So if that was the case, and it seems to be the case, this is evident why
mm,
this explains why Freemasonry were behind the unification of Italy, because unification of Italy, to me, is really about the collapse of the Papal States,
mm,
and the capture of Rome, and the Pope going into hiding. So to me, it's not about, people look, oh, it's great, now we're united. Southern Italy and Northern Italy is united. We're all happy. We're all one people.
mm,
But that's not the case. To me, it was about removing the power of the papacy, and Freemasonry doing or helping the City of London achieve that. And then the City of London says, okay, now we're the top dogs here.
mm.
They're just taking out their rivals, a mafia style again. It all goes back to mafia.
Of course.
One mafia group is taking out the other.
Mm,
Haven't destroyed them, just taken their power base. They didn't take them out because it's amazing how similar it is to the way mafia works. It's
mm,
like one family, you can't take out the other family. You can take their power base, but you can't kill them. It's almost this kind of little bit of respect still there. Otherwise, the other mafia families will get upset.
mm.
You can't kill them, but you can take them out. It's fine. I also found something of interest that Garibaldi and Mancini were involved with an early uprising that was unsuccessful before this one, before the successful unification uprising. So they were part of a failed attempt earlier on. And
Mm.
what did they do? So they can't stay in Italy. They're given sanctuary in London, which is a pattern that I find throughout history. And you see the same with the communists. Marx. Where does he go? He goes to London, and
Mm,
it's almost like London's like, okay, everyone can come here. We're against their philosophy, but they can stay here, and they've got a safe haven. Because communism never takes hold in England.
yeah.
There was a brief movement there, but it was smashed. But they're okay to accommodate these revolutionists around the world for some reason. So that always stayed with me as a point of to look further into it. What's going on here? Why are they okay to be in England, but not okay to be in their own countries?
That's certainly news to me, and it basically solidifies the thought. Well, actually, it goes beyond solidifying it. It shows how the British, when they started conquering, that it still continued, and it continues to this day.
Yeah, exactly. So this leads on to, the revolutions of the 19th century. There's a few of them, and if you look into it, England is playing a certain part in all of them. And then if you look into World War One and then World War Two, behind the scenes there, I mean, they're always involved. They're involved with everything. They're involved with Zionism as well, as you know. We mentioned that in an earlier podcast.
Hmm.
So yeah, this is as soon as they cement their power, when they take out the Vatican, then you see them,
Yeah.
expanding this method.
Does this have relevance from the transition of the old world order to what we commonly refer to today as the new world order? Is there anything that's
Well,
of relevance there?
well, I mean, I think I've used that in the subtitle, out with the old and in with the new world order,
Hmm.
because I believe that the Catholic Church and the Vatican, and as an extension, probably, the whole Roman Empire, whatever that
Hmm.
was the old world order. So the Roman Empire was, and as an extension of the Roman Empire, the Roman Catholic Church
Hmm.
becomes the old world order. So when people refer to the New World Order, you can't still be calling that entity the New World Order. So what is it? There's a point where the old one collapses and the new one takes over. And I think this is an indication of when that occurs. People refer to America as a New World Order, as you see with their $1 bill and all the symbols there.
Hmm.
But
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
as we've mentioned before, America is just an extension of the British Empire. So
That's right.
that makes sense again that America and Britain are still, that empire is the one empire, and it's the new world order empire.
Well, America is still, considered that it's under the Commonwealth, under the British rule. But what I want to ask you is, during the unification, because the papacy has separated because of what Britain did. What's the connection between, the Vatican and the City of London today? Because we know that the Vatican, the City of London, Washington, D.C. is
Okay.
what they call the triangle for the New World Order. So how does that connect, seeing that the Vatican was the breakaway, the papacy was the breakaway from when unification happened?
Well, there are some conspiracy theorists that would say that they're the one entity. If you go back far enough, they're the one entity, but I don't see that, and no one has shown me any evidence that that's the case. I see them as separate. Or you can make a case that one grew out of the other, which would the British grew out of the Roman Catholic Church, because don't forget that the Roman Empire was all over England at one point. They
Mm.
ruled, England for centuries. So there might be a case, if you go far back enough, to suggest that London and the guilds were born from the Roman state that was present there at the time. But that's going back quite far. But back to your question, no, I don't see them unified. I don't see the Vatican as part of, the City of London and part of Washington, D.C. I don't see them as one entity. No.
Are they three entities working together?
No,
They're
I
not.
don't think they are.
No. Well,
No.
okay, that's interesting because I've read the opposite of what.
Yeah, I know. I have too, but people don't show me any evidence.
Mm.
And don't forget, with what do you call it? The King George separated from the Catholic Church. That was made clear. There was revolution. They separated. So I think that was the point where maybe before that they were that one entity, as you say, but then the king broke away
Was it
from the
King
church.
George or was it Henry VIII that?
You're right. It's Henry VIII.
Yeah. Regardless,
Yeah, Henry VIII. Yeah, so they broke away. England broke away from the power of the papacy.
the
You know,
Church of England,
so
which
yeah,
was
no, I don't see him as one entity. But and this is another point. Since the Papal States, also since the creation of Vatican City, the papacy it's obviously been infiltrated by Masonic groups, and people have written about that. There's a lot of evidence that that's the case. So even the direction of the Catholic Church has moved in a different direction based on the
mm.
infiltration of Freemasonry and other groups. Some say Jewish groups as well.
Well, the reason why I say that, and particular note of the Vatican, the City of London, and Washington DC, because in their respective countries they are independent states.
Yeah.
Okay, the Vatican is a city within a city. The City of London is a city within a city. Washington DC is independent of all other 49 states.
Yeah, but don't forget that the reason the Vatican is because that was forced upon them by this revolution directed by the City of London.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
okay. So if anything, it was because of, the City of London that city state was formed in the first place.
Mm. Okay. So, based on, what we've just discussed, where do you think this is all going? Old world order to what people now commonly coin
Okay.
the new world order. Is there an awakening happening that people are saying, we know you're there, we can see you, you're now weaker than what you initially were, or has nothing changed?
No, I'll just see what is it today compared to what it, historically was. It has no power. So if the church does not take some kind of initiative, it's going to die. Because I've written other articles where I've shown that membership has fallen dramatically over the years, and it's
But you're
declining
talking,
every year.
but you're talking specifically the church, the Catholic
Yeah, the
Church.
church.
I'm talking more holistically about, the City of London, the Vatican, the Freemasonry, what we commonly refer to as the globalists, the elitists,
Yeah,
the.
well, I think the Catholic Church, like I was going to say, is going to die, or they have to come back. So they have to counteract this event, and it's almost like a mafia payback hit. It needs to occur. I mean, you've been to London in recent years or England. That's a shadow of its former self. I
Of
mean,
course.
whatever that's under collapse at the moment. So maybe that a sign that that's been orchestrated by outside forces from the City of London. I don't know. I think we'll see in the ensuing years another power grab or power shift.
And
Like I
not
said, City of London.
mm.
So City of London, where Freemasonry are on top at the moment, but it might move, it might shift.
So as a side note, as we know and as we've spoken about before, Freemasonry has been around long before the Knights Templar, as you suggested last week. Will that continue to be yet another secret society, even though they don't refer to themselves as a secret society? They're out in the open, but in actual fact, if you talk about if we delve deep enough into Freemasonry, we know that it's not just going to disappear overnight.
No, no. See, the thing is that I don't believe they disappeared. They might evolve into something else because Freemasonry today is probably not what it was 700 years ago, even further back than that.
Further back, yeah.
Where it comes out of the mystery schools of the Far East. So it was probably something else then, and then it slowly changes, and it might change again. We're entering a new age. A new age requires a new operating system.
The age of Aquarius, which again is probably there's so much to talk about that, but which we won't.
I know.
So, with regard to what we've discussed today, what are your closing comments in terms of where it's been, what has happened, and where it's going?
Well, you just want to go back and say a lot of these events that we see, you always look at the English or the British arm behind these events, and And you were asking me earlier about today, and you say,
Mm,
okay, where do you see it today? And you see it in even in the conflict with Ukraine and Russia.
mm,
I mean, MI6 is all over that thing. You
right.
know, their stained hands are all over it. You go back enough, and even with prior to the war, MI6 was all over that thing. You know, why are they still? They're always there. They're always involved some way in some. And obviously America is there too. But they're sort of America don't hide it. They're front and center. Where the British, the MI6 are a little bit better at obscuring their involvement. And if you find whenever there's an international event as well, like when they blew up the gas pipeline early
Mm,
in the conflict, who makes the official report about these things? It's always MI6.
right. Okay.
Yeah, it's like they're the first there to investigate, so-called investigate. Maybe they're there to cover up their tracks. So they're still involved. They're still involved
Mm,
today. You know, this old power, this power, the City of London, I see it's still in control or
mm.
still maintains a high level of power.
I'd be interested to know. I know that MI6 is located in Vauxhall, which is in London, but I'll be interested to know, and I'll do a little bit more research
Mm.
as to whether that's within the City of London. I don't think it is, but it'd be
Yeah,
interested
I'm not
to make
sure.
that connection. So, what does this mean for people listening to this podcast, or what does it mean for the general population? Does history just repeat itself and continue to repeat
Okay.
itself?
What it shows me, and this is a pattern that I've noticed with my research, looking into history, it's always you really need to view it as simply as like a mafia operation, one group taking out another group. But the way they do it is they do it through, this is a perfect example of their methods where, all of a sudden there's an uprising on, it's the same with the, Russian Revolution and all these revolutions. It's not the people being disappointed and taking arms. I mean, if that was the case, Americans would have overthrown their government years ago.
Mm,
Australians would have overthrown their government years ago. Really, these revolutions are allowed to happen. Otherwise, it would be a revolution every day. They're allowed to happen. Why? Because there's a strong entity behind them, financing them, supporting them, giving them military aid. And what I found is that the British are behind a lot of them, and they're all also behind a lot of the revolutions in South America too. When they were all those states were held under the Spanish Empire.
mm.
Now, yeah, you see a lot, and that's another one. Garibaldi was fighting in Uruguay as well, and
Okay.
which people don't realize he was all over South America, and that's where he got his famous name. His force were called the Red Shirts. That all
Okay.
started from his involvement in battles over there.
Mm,
And who did that benefit? That benefited the British Empire. So when Spain lost all the Spanish colonies, Britain was able to go in there to take over the trade and commerce that was held by the Spanish at the time. So Spain lost all that. And again, Garibaldi was involved on the side of the revolutionists in South America. And again, that benefits the British Empire.
which is why his family still has very close ties with the
Exactly.
City of
Yeah.
London.
Yeah.
I think this opens up a lot of debate. People will be asking a lot of questions as to why, when, the how, and how it continues to this very day with regard to British colonisation. It's just another form of it. Um, do you have any final words?
Just that, yeah, we find, again, I'm just repeating myself, but yeah, we
Mm,
find the British very accommodating, especially the City of London, to a lot of these individuals or groups that, create chaos in their own nations. Like I mentioned earlier, Karl Marx, and
mm,
why would a nation, a capitalist nation, like a mercantile nation like England or London, support anything to do with communism? Why would they? If that was my home, would I let in this threat? It could be a potential threat to me in my home.
mm,
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't support that person. But they seem to support all these people, all these revolutionists around the world.
mm.
So we need to look into that and why that's the case.
Well, I hope it certainly creates some external discourse, and people start to even do very simple desktop research, investigating, or at least trying to learn more about the British Empire, the Roman Empire, how the City of London has, to this day, still influence over global financial decisions, because again, it comes down to financial. But I thank you for the research that you've done. And if people are interested in reading more about The City Takes Rome, which is a very, very in-depth article, together with some other fantastic pieces of research that Phoenician Hunter has undertaken, then simply go to substack.com/Phoenician Hunter. You can subscribe. There are a couple of free articles that will whet the appetite, but I would assure you that subscription will definitely pay itself within one read of one article. And to listen to the full podcast and other podcasts that we have produced, simply go to youtube.com/@Tesla369. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
And I look forward to our next podcast, which will no doubt be another very interesting discussion.